Dear President Schwenk, dear President Malia, dear moderator, dear colleague in this panel, Daria Tatai, ladies and gentlemen, do not ask me what the EU will look like in 2040. Who would have predicted in 2007 that we would be in constant crisis? Even if one must be careful with the word crisis, how else can we call what happened with the banks, the eurozone, the refugees in 2015, 2016, the pandemic, or terrorism? So I've learned not to predict, but I can try to outline what the EU should look like, regardless of the circumstances. First of all, the Union must be united, united internally and externally. That means greater social cohesion now that inequalities have been rising again for some years, and also because of the pandemic and because inflation could last longer than expected. However, social differences remain smaller than in other countries. The integration of non-EU citizens also remains a major challenge for social cohesion. The EU is a unifying project that cannot endure internal polarization. And we also need to be more united externally. Even though we recently managed to be unanimous on sanctions against Russia and China and in the Brexit negotiations. The rule of unanimity should change on foreign policy. If we want to be geopolitically relevant, we have to send a clear message. Second characteristic for the Union must be more sovereign and also strategically autonomous, less overly dependent on others in strategic areas such as the digital, energy, defense, external borders, the dollar, the London city, batteries, chips, medical equipment, medicines, food, and others. We must do this while respecting the multilaterally agreed rules. We need to protect our interests without being protectionist. The Commission is active in all these areas. And the same tendency can be found among other global actors, this tendency to be much more sovereign, much more autonomous. And it stems from the mistrust that has grown in recent years. This strategic autonomy does not stop the globalization of trade. On the contrary, I'll give you an example. Chinese exports to the EU climbed by 33% year on year in November, 33%. Third, the Union must be more innovative, also in new areas such as digital and climate. It needs both economies of scale and alliances to compete with the Chinese and American giants, and we also need a wealth of startups from young people. And that's why the Capital Market Union must be accelerated, and why scientific research cooperation must be high, building, among other things, on the very important Horizon programs. By the way, the biggest scientific program in the world, Horizon Europe. We need to use every talent in the Union, especially given the demographic implosion that is already underway and in these times of digital revolution. China, Russia, and Japan also know this demographic implosion. Some types of migration is necessary, but irregular migration puts pressure on our societies and fuels populist instability. Europe has fallen behind in some areas, but in others the fight is not over. The fight is not lost. We need to join forces. I wonder whether this cooperation is sufficiently contained in the new recovery fund. Industrial policy is fortunately no longer a prohibited word in the Union. And, for example, it is not a forbidden word in Germany, which is rather new. A competitive economy is essential to defend and promote our interests and our values geopolitically. The economic transformation must take into account the Union's own values. A central value is democracy. There is no union without democracy. And that's why it is worrying that on both sides of the Atlantic, up to 1/5 of the citizens no longer believe in democracy. For populist parties, democracy is only a means to power. Democracy has no value in itself for them. And we saw that on January the 6th. And in at least 2 EU countries, the rule of law is under direct threat. The Conference on the Future of Europe is working on proposals to strengthen participatory and representative democracy so that more citizens are somehow more involved in the political agenda. There are already good examples of this deliberative participatory democracy. In Barcelona, so dear to my colleague in this panel, in Barcelona, an open source platform was designed to engage citizens into participatory democracy to co-create city solutions. I personally heard in the Committee of the Regions, your neighbor, last week, I heard the City Council talk about the great results obtained in Catalonia. But above all, our institutions must deliver results to make citizens feel better protected. Better protected against what? Against unemployment, insecure jobs, irregular migration, terrorism, major inequalities, fraud and corruption, climate change and others. Democracy needs more input, more involvement, and output. It needs results. The social media, with its flood of disinformation, lies and hate speech, play a pernicious role. How can we turn the digital revolution around for the better and restore a climate of dialogue? Democracy, ladies and gentlemen, is conversation. And by the way, the future belongs to teamwork, connectivity, networks. It is the royal way to creativity and entrepreneurship. The digital can offer many possibilities for this. It should not reinforce individualization of our societies. We need not only skilled and creative individuals, but also stable, vibrant and inclusive societies. The Union can achieve many of these objectives without amending the treaties. Moreover, the text still provides for almost unused means of speeding up decisions. Besides, a treaty change would consume years of political energy and political attention. And in the current climate, it is not certain that more European integration, what we call with the slogan, more Europe, would be the result. The pandemic has proven that the recovery fund could be set up and joint purchasing of vaccines decided with the current division of powers, especially after Brexit. The UK would have prevented us from going that far. The Commission is now making proposals to be able to react quickly if countries are hit by sanctions without the need for unanimity. So we can do a lot within the current treaties. It is striking how the pandemic has demonstrated the importance of strong governance. The same authorities play an indispensable role in steering economies and society in the right direction on climate, especially as time for climate is pressing. Health and education are public goods that must not be sacrificed to a blind austerity policy. And we also learned this during the pandemic. I already mentioned strategic autonomy and industrial policy as potential political objectives or political instruments. Politics also plays a major role even in the Trump years through protectionist policies even towards the Union. This was a political decision against the interest of business, against the interest of the economy. Brexit was a political decision, certainly not an economic one. And this renewed role of governments, for the better and for worse, must go hand in hand with close cooperation with the private sector. Technology, embodied technology, and innovation also play a crucial role in health and climate. The EU must also be, of course, forward-looking. Climate change plays a key role in this. The deterioration of the climate in comparison with the situation in the Paris agreements exactly 6 years ago is dramatic. The COP26 in Glasgow was not a complete failure, but neither was it a sufficient success to turn the tide sufficiently. The EU is ambitious in its objectives, by the way, legally enforceable objectives. The EU is ambitious in its objectives and its instruments. I am referring, for instance, to the carbon adjustment border tax. The succession of climate disasters puts pressure on all governments in all countries. For a number of countries and companies, this adjustment is painful, even though from a general point of view it is necessary and inevitable. But public opinion is also divided, not so much on the goals as on almost every single measure. So a lot of leadership and political courage is therefore required. All the more so because the results of unpopular measures are only visible after many years, even decades. So there is no electoral reward for political courage and leadership. Geopolitically, the EU must first and foremost look after the welfare of its citizens with respect for the multilateral order and peace. The EU has no ambition to become a military superpower, and recent events in Afghanistan show the limitation of the military. The pandemic has made us realize that we are only safe when everyone is safe. The globalization of the disease should call for global governance. Unfortunately, current mistrust prevents this. I already mentioned this. The EU favors dialogue with like-minded people and those who are not like-minded. We have our allies, but also we remain strategically autonomous. We are open without being naive. We dialogue while remaining firm about our principles. Ladies and gentlemen, the key words are unity, sovereignty, democracy, innovation and competitiveness, valorizing the current treaties, future-oriented, geopolitics based on dialogue and principles. We need more Europe. We need a better Europe, a Europe of determination, a Europe of moderation. Thank you so much.